So this is one of those things where everybody thinks they know what it means, but I don't think anybody actually knows what it means. Hi everybody, welcome back to A Well-Read Nerd, and welcome back to another fanfiction video, where thanks to one of my subs, I hope you're still subbed, I haven't checked my sub list, but you did comment on my last one for the Citrus Scale, TK Bar, about my reference to Dead Dove Do Not Eat. So this entire video is dedicated to you. Now, in this, I'm just going to break it down. I'm going to go over the origin of where this came from, some things that have arisen since then, and then where I think this is going forward. So there's 3 parts to this little video essay. I'm trying to actually cohesively put my thoughts together now so that you guys just don't listen to rambling, but no guarantees. So let's first start by talking about where this term came from. Dead dove do not eat. Now, originally it came from a meme. This meme that was from an episode of Arrested Development. I'll insert the clip here so that you guys can take a look and see the exact context of where this came from.
Oh, I don't know what I expected.
But yeah, Dead Dove Do Not Eat, in its origins, basically meant read what's on the outside, read the label. What the label says is what you get. Now, this term, as far as its involvement in fandom, actually isn't that old. It wasn't actually officially, canonized, I guess you can say, on AO3 as a tag until 2015. And it was actually submitted by an account called Mostly Valid. It's since been orphaned as far as I can tell, but they were the first person to submit this tag. So at this point in 2023, this tag has officially only been going for 8 years. Now that's important because I am going to basically explain how it's changed in those 8 years, and it's a bit of a ride, so buckle up, buttercups. But its original meaning, dealing with that meme, dates back to about 2010. The earliest example of it being solidified was something called a dead dove moment on Urban Dictionary in 2012. But I seem to remember about that time it just being floated around. And again, it basically meant what it says is what you get. And this was a very important step, especially with the inclusion of tags on AO3. Prior to AO3, there was no tagging system for fan fiction. Most places where people go, besides AO3, FF.net, and Wattpad, there are no tagging systems. And again, I keep meaning to make a Wattpad episode or video and tell you guys why I hate Wattpad. If you want to know my honest opinion about why I hate Wattpad, please comment, because I want to know at least one other person is going to listen to my unhinged rant. But yeah, there's no tagging system like there is on AO3. The tagging system on AO3 is very in-depth, and users for the archive, because it is an archive, it's just a repository of fan fiction, can submit them to be included all the time. Usually you have to have so many posts that are using the tag before you can submit it to be an official tag, but you can submit to have it recognized as an official tag. So when you go through the filter section, you can just go ahead and select that tag and have it on there. Now, why this came about because of AO3 and the tagging system is because then people could get very specific with what is in their fan fiction. Prior to that, it was sort of no man's land of figuring out what was in stuff. I read so many things that probably I shouldn't have been reading at the time, but you know what? That's between me and my therapist. But yeah, before that, there was no tagging. You just had to trust that whatever they put in the summary or whatever was accurate to what was going to be in the fan fiction. And here's the thing, most people didn't update those after they first wrote them. They wrote them when they first started writing the fanfic, and then they just abandoned updating the summary. So what you saw was what you get. Doesn't matter if suddenly in chapter 97 they I don't know, put forth cannibal aliens or something. It doesn't matter because there's no mention of it up until you get to that point, and it's not in the summary, so oh well. But the adding of tags meant that you could easily go back and change tags whenever you wanted to. Instead of having to update the summary, you just go in and you add a tag. That's it. You just add it. And how Dead Dove Do Not Eat plays into this, and was a good thing at the time, was because it was a way of allowing people to know hey, you have to like read the tags, like pay attention to the tags, pay attention to what's in there, so that you don't read something you don't want to read. Now, this was also back in the days before they had an exclude button on AO3. Like, that didn't used to be a thing. They added that, I don't know, probably like 2016, I want to say. I'd have to look up and see if anybody knows online, but it wasn't always there. You couldn't always exclude tags. So Dead Dove was very important to let people know to read all of the tags so that they knew what they were getting themselves into. The problem is that meaning quickly shifted. Quickly. Like within a matter of a few years. I'd say by 2019, definitely. So like less than 4 years since it became an official tag. Less than a decade since like referring to things this way became something. What Dead Dove Do Not Eat came to mean was, hey, there's some really messed up stuff in here. Like, so messed up. Like, you would not believe how messed up this stuff is. So I tagged it, Dead Dove Do Not Eat, with no other context of what's in there. And this became a generational difference. I have been in fandom spaces since the early 2000s, okay? So when Dead Dove Do Not Eat came out, I latched onto the original meaning of it. However, by the time 2019 rolled around, you had people that were 15, 16 getting into fan fiction, some a little older than that, who already only took context clues of what that meant. Like, they didn't know that it meant that you're supposed to tag appropriately and then let people know that they need to read the tags. All they saw was Dead Dove Do Not Eat attached to a lot of tags of some really messed up stuff. And before you go like, well, they should have known about the meme. Like, no, they shouldn't. Like, there's no reason why a 15-year-old in 2019 is going to remember an Arrested Development meme from like 2011. Like, that's not feasible for them to know what that is. I barely got the reference at the time because I didn't watch Arrested Development. It was just something I saw floating around on fanfiction forums and other forums, just like things that, like, you know, funny little things of like, haha, Dead Dove Do Not Eat. But yeah, so by the time those people like actively became part of those communities and they only had context to go off of, they didn't bother to ask anybody. They just went, oh yeah, this is what it means, and they just started using it that way. Now, at the same time, the same kids, because they were at the time kids, now they're full-fledged adults, hopefully, were getting into fan fiction. They were starting to look back at older eras of fan fiction. You know, that meme of, there's a TikTok that was going around of the girl that wishes she was on the Tumblr scene in 2013. It's like, no, you don't. Like, I was a full-grown woman and I was not prepared for Tumblr in 2013, okay? Nobody prepares you for Super Hulock. Or the girlies that will roast you over Super Hulock. So, yeah, it was Wild West times back then on Tumblr, too. With, like, and before that, I lived through the scene days. You know, like all those girls with MySpaces and multicolored hair doing this. Anyway. I've lived through several eras on the internet, and at this point I'm old and jaded, and I haven't even seen 35 years yet. But yeah, those girls were also raised in a post-purity culture era of fan fiction. What do I mean by a post-purity culture era of fan fiction? We've gone through a few. The earliest one was in the early 2000s when the copyright strikes were going off against fanfiction sites, and the cease and desists were also going around. And that was basically for adult content, what was perceived as adult content. And I know I mentioned this in my Citrus Scale video, you can go check it out, about there was a lot of allegations of, let's abbreviate it, CP. And I will explain it as not safe for work content involving people of a minority in their ages. But yeah, that's just in case anybody wants to flag this. My fanfiction videos always get flagged on here. But yeah, there were accusations of that. Were they true? Not necessarily. A lot of the people who were creating the content that would be considered CP were themselves teenagers writing fanfiction about other teenagers. That's a fine line of what is and is not considered a certain thing legality-wise. As I mentioned before in my other video, I have set in on philosophy of law professors, try to hash out the nuances of this, especially because it's creative works, and if it's a child creating a creative work dealing with another child, what is that considered? Or even if it is an adult creating a creative work and like all of that stuff, it's a literal headache. I left that lecture series having no more inclination of an idea of what my stance on it should be as when I went in. And that was being given by somebody with 2 PhDs. So needless to say, the moms that were like picket signing, like take it down, didn't exactly have a nuanced idea of what was going on either, especially back then. But that blew through. We dealt with the purity culture, like, as a whole of Americans. After that, a lot of backlash against fan communities for perpetrating things that went against purity culture, which purity culture is a myth, but it's not a thing that happened, but like it's so complicated. I can make an entire video of somebody who lived in the South during the height of purity culture. We went through that a couple of times, okay? And through the last rash of it in like the early 2010s, there was a lot of push to take things down, okay? With this also came a rash of people when we were going through a wave of the takedowns, inappropriate, flag it for, violation, all that stuff, of people leaving out tags and just putting in dead dove, do not eat. Now, there were ways that those people were then getting around people flagging their work, one of which was they were putting what was in it inside the author's notes, inside the fan fictions. But again, those younger kids who were coming up in the community saw that, and they just went, oh, this is what it means. It means like messed up stuff. And then when tagging, the cease and desist stopped again, people went back to tagging like normal and all that. They, again, just saw it as shorthand for, like, really messed up stuff. And they weren't wrong. Like, a lot of people who used it because they did have very controversial topics in their fanfiction, and they wanted people to pay attention to the tags. The disconnect comes with the shorthand of it, because those older creators still put the tags in there so that you knew exactly what you're getting into. As you went on later, people stopped contextualizing dead dove and just left it as is. Just meant that it's shorthand for any and all really, really messed up thing you could find here. And that lack of communication became a problem. It especially became a problem as older content creators tried to point out to younger content creators that the terms they were using weren't helpful for people. It wasn't helpful that they did that. You weren't helping anybody. Like, nobody knows what you're talking about. And there was backlash from younger creators basically being like, no, it's what I learned it meant, which they did technically, but it's more nuanced and there's a lot more going on than just like, oh, that's what it is, so like that's what I did. And I think there's just a generational disconnect there. But yeah, so you have a lot of going back and forth to the point where today most people only know it by that second meeting. They only know that if it says dead dove do not eat, it means it's really messed up, like super messed up. But that's just a shift in like colloquialisms within fan communities, anyways. Don't like, don't read is another example of this. DLDR. Nowadays it's a catch-all for basically anything, any tags or anything that they have that if you don't like, don't read it. But it has its origins back in the day when people used to write content involving gay and lesbian characters, more so gay characters, but gay and lesbian characters, that would then be like thrashed across the coals, metaphorically speaking, for writing that content and posting it. So they started tagging it don't like, don't read. That way the bigots would know not to read. They would automatically know what kind of content was in there. And yes, they would still seek them out, but then people who were like bigoted but not like hateful bigot would just skip over it. But now that's become a catch-all for no matter what I write. Like, if you don't like it, don't read it. which is, again, fine. It's just, when I first started seeing it that way, I was confused because I didn't know why, one, they were using like such a flashback term, something I hadn't seen used in a long time. Not really. And why they were using it that way when it like contextually it wasn't the context I would expect it to be in, but it's a shifting dynamic. It's a shifting dynamic also to not want criticism for your fan fiction. And this is tied into Dead Dove. I'm not just going on a tangent. It's kind of a tangent, but not really. And you see no constructive criticism on a lot of people's posts. That's fine. They want to be in their little sound bubble where everybody tells them how amazing they are at writing, when in all honesty, they're mediocre. And I say this as a practically professional mediocre writer. What I mean by that is I keep attempting to write mediocre and nobody wants to pay me for it. But yeah, you get a sounding board of like, I'm great, I'm amazing, because you control the comments and you control the narrative around whatever art you're putting out, because a lot of them view it as art. But no constructive criticism also comes from people criticizing their tagging. Like, a lot of people will go like, hey, I don't think that was appropriate, or hey, like, it wasn't clear and I didn't like it because of this, and they don't want those people to comment. They just like shoo them away, because I've seen those interactions too. Now, as I've stated before, and I'll say it again, fanfiction is not a monolith. Every single community is different. In the last, I'll say last 10 years, I've been actively involved in about 9 fandom communities, okay? Some of them are more into this no concrete, don't like anybody telling you that you're not being clear and all that stuff, more so than others, okay? Big surprise at one of the ones that I was traipsing through a couple of years ago because I was looking for a nostalgia read. Couldn't find it. Looks like it was deleted. That's beside the point. It was in the HP verse. And big surprise that Bigot Central appears to be breeding other little, very opinionated people. Take that for what you will. But it's not just there. I've also seen it over in the SPN fandom, which is short for Supernatural. I haven't been involved in anime fandoms for a while. Just haven't. Nothing's really like jumped out as something that I want to get involved, that I want to start reading in. A Song of Ice and Fire I read in for a while. The MCU I read in for a while. So you get the fandom hopping that I do. And these things I did not see cohesively across all of them. I think it also depends on, like I said, the age of the people engaging in it. Some of them, like A Song of Ice and Fire and Supernatural, seem to be people who had been writing for a while. You get those first-time writers, but that's nothing new. You always have first-time writers. But it seemed to be people that had written for a long time in a lot of different fandoms, that cycle through them like I did. Same thing with the MCU fanfiction. A lot of cycle writers. You go through what you're into, your hyperfixation this year, and you go from there. HP, I saw a lot of new writers, so I think maybe that's it. It's just a different generation, and what they consider appropriate and what I consider appropriate are two different things. I am a little bit worried about that, about the rise of that, especially with younger writers, just because if you can't take criticism for something that you're putting out for fun, I worry that you won't be able to take criticism when it's something important to you that you need those criticisms for. I say this as somebody who's frequently criticized on here. You'll notice most of the comments are still up. Like I said, you get 3 times to tell me I'm stupid and then I block you and I delete your comments. So yeah, I think it's just a general drift. The problem is like I said, people like me are still they're still actively engaged in fan fiction, still using those older terms, are going to find it harder to connect linguistically with younger people in the forums, okay? And that really is damaging to fandom communities as a whole, just because there's a lack of communication. There's a lack of clarity of communication. Now we can get past this. I would like for the younger generations, if they're not going to use the predetermined slang that we all came up with and agreed on, like, you know, a few years ago that's no longer relevant, like to come up with their own terms so that like we could still have these conversations. A little bit of that is, like I said, if you watch my citrus scale video, if not, like I said, I probably pinned it somewhere here, go check it out, is the adding of grapefruit as like even more extreme than like lemon when it comes to graphic content. And I mentioned how it was tied in with this. I'd seen that a lot. But again, I'd seen a lot of legacy writers using it that way. But I had seen a lot of newer writers using the grapefruit term. So like that's good in a way because they're still trying to communicate what their work is to other people. It's one of those things that like you don't see it till you go looking for it when it came to like the grapefruit thing. And I'm sure if you guys were to go over and you were to like start looking through fan fictions and stuff like that, again, not a monolith, just, you know, it depends on what fandom you pick, you would probably see examples of what I'm talking about. Now, you could also look through 20 pages in a certain fandom and not find any examples of what I'm talking about. That's fine too, because again, it varies so widely. I am making wide, sweeping generalizations about fandom spaces because that's the only way you can do this, because there are so many microcosms in fandom, so many little niches and everything else. Like, I mean, like, you know, I'm trying to think of an example. Where, like, the interpretation of things would be so different. Here, I'll give you an example. This deals with Marvel. I've read in Marvel, like Marvel Sphere for years. Actually used to read fan fiction for the comic books, and then the movies and stuff came out. And I've read in that too. But if you were to look at the MCU and look through the tags and then look at the Marvel comics, like whatever it is, Captain America, whatever, you are going to see differences in trends between the two. Now, both of them are connected, like they are both dealing with Marvel properties. However, the types of stories that you see and the types of characterizations and characters and themes that they put into those works are two completely different things. Even though both of them could ostensibly be about Captain America, they will be about two different things entirely. And a way of exemplifying this, I'll use shipping as an example. MCU, largest ship out there pretty much right now, I think, is still Stucky. It's Steve Rogers and Bucky Barnes. If you travel on over to the same thing for just Marvel Comics and you look through that, the biggest tag will probably still be Tony Stark and Steve Rogers. And before you go, that's the movies. Those two predate the movies. Like, you gotta remember, up until like 2009, Bucky Barnes was just a dead kid. And I mean that literally. He was a teenager. He was like 15, 16, and he died during World War II. He didn't come back. I was in college when the Winter Soldier arc went. So a lot of those people like have been writing for a while, and so you can see what I mean. Like different people gravitate to different media, different people gravitate to different ideas, different people communicate differently depending on which area of the sphere they have decided to put themselves in. A lot of the terms I talk about are overarching terms that are pan fandom. That's a term I'm coining right now. I'm not sure if anybody else has coined it already. Pan fandom, where they appear sweeping across fandoms, like the citrus scale, like Dead Dove Do Not Eat. And those overarching things, again, the nuance is different in the microcosm. In the macrocosm, like, there needs to be some cohesive understanding, collective understanding of what the words mean. Do I have a solution for this? No, I'm just rambling. Welcome to my corner of the internet. I ramble about fan fiction. Hi. But yeah, it's just a drift, and it's an important drift to talk about, especially as people like me who are older throw around terms, because then you don't have any context for them. Now my video has given you context for exactly, if anybody ever mentions this to you, you have a contextual jumping off point without doing a rabbit hole deep dive down Fanlore. I mean, you're still welcome to do that. I'll link Fanlore down below. Not the specific pages, because I don't need another flag on my channel, but I will link Fanlore, and you can just search Dead Dove Do Not Eat. But yeah, these are just things to talk about. Like, there are things, especially if anybody's interested in fan fiction, like maybe they've just like been introduced to it and they don't understand the even limited history behind things. Some people probably think these terms go back a lot longer than they do, but the answer is they don't. The term ABO, I think, wasn't even coined until like 2011 or 2012. Yeah, the term mpreg, I think, first appeared as mpreg in like 2003, 2004. You know, give it some time. Like give that some leeway. It might have just been one example I read. Somebody could dig up something later that predates that, or no, actually that wasn't. Somebody went back and changed it later. But you get my drift. Anyway, thank you, TK, for asking about that. Like I said, this episode's dedicated to you. I hope you watched it all the way through. If you did, you get a gold star in the comment section. Let me know if you did. I will figure out how to put a gold star emoji next to your comment. Yeah, it's just an interesting ride and an interesting shift in contextual and cultural understandings of terms. And I felt like rambling about it with you guys. So if you have any questions, concerns, once again, not about my mental health, I already know, just leave them down below and we can have a conversation about it. If you like this video, go ahead and hit thumbs up, subscribe if you like this kind of content, or if you like any of my other zany content, you can go check it out. This used to be an unboxing channel. I still unbox things sometimes, but I'm more likely to sit in my office at, 11 o'clock on a Tuesday and ramble on about fan fiction with you guys now, and I'm kind of okay with that. In any case, that's gonna be it for now, and I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.